Workplace politics is not a side effect of work. It is the work. The meetings, the emails, the polite smiles, the performance reviews, these are only costumes worn over an older, colder reality. Every office is a miniature court. Every colleague is a potential ally, rival, or threat. And the moment you believe skill alone protects you, you become prey. Machiavelli would not look at your workplace and see professionalism. He would see territory, influence, survival disguised as cooperation. You were taught to believe competence rises naturally to the top, that fairness governs outcomes, that honesty is rewarded. These ideas soothe the ego but disarm the mind. The truth is more primitive. Humans did not evolve in meeting rooms. They evolved in tribes where status determined access to resources, protection, and mating rights. The brain you carry into the office is still wired for hierarchy, still scanning for dominance signals, still responding to power more than logic. You may think you are above this. Your colleagues think the same. Yet every promotion, every exclusion, every quiet shift in tone proves otherwise. The first rule Machiavelli would follow is simple, but psychologically brutal. Never fight for recognition. Control perception instead. Recognition depends on others deciding your worth. Perception allows you to define it before they think to question it. Most people work hard hoping their effort will speak for itself. Effort never speaks. People speak. Narratives speak. Reputation speaks. If you are silent about your own value, someone else will write the story, and they will write it to benefit themselves. Watch how fear works in a workplace. It rarely screams, it whispers. The fear of being overlooked, the fear of becoming replaceable, the fear of social exclusion disguised as professional feedback. These fears make people predictable. They talk too much, they over-explain, they volunteer weaknesses hoping honesty will earn trust. But predators do not reward exposed vulnerabilities, they catalog them. Machiavelli understood that power belongs to the one who controls emotional temperature. When others rush to defend themselves, you remain calm. When they panic over perception, you shape perception quietly. Silence becomes a weapon because humans rush to fill silence with assumptions, and assumptions can be guided. You must understand something uncomfortable. Your workplace is full of actors who do not know they are acting. They believe they are authentic while constantly adjusting tone, language, and loyalty to maintain acceptance. This is not hypocrisy. It is survival instinct wearing a civilized mask. The person who sees this clearly gains an invisible advantage. You stop reacting emotionally to office politics because you recognize it as a game of positioning, not morality. Imagine a predator watching a herd. The predator does not chase every target. It studies movement. It notices hesitation. In workplaces, hesitation looks like over-eagerness to please, constant justification, or desperate attempts to be liked by everyone. Those who need universal approval become easy to control. They bend before pressure arrives. They surrender before conflict begins. The illusion you must destroy inside yourself is the need to be understood. Understanding is fragile. Respect is structural. Respect is built from controlled unpredictability, the sense that you are calm, capable, and slightly unreadable. Not hostile, not cold, just difficult to manipulate. People test boundaries unconsciously. If every request receives instant compliance, they learn your limits are soft. If your responses are measured, deliberate, and sometimes delayed, they learn to approach you with care. This is not about cruelty. It is about alignment with reality. The workplace rewards those who understand human nature more than those who deny it. You are not becoming darker. You are becoming accurate. You are stepping out of the illusion that goodwill alone protects you. And once you see the game clearly, you begin to notice something unsettling. The most influential people are rarely the loudest, rarely the busiest, rarely the most emotional. They are the ones who choose when to speak, when to disappear, and when to let others reveal their intentions first. Because power does not rush, power waits.
The second rule Machiavelli would follow is to master visibility without becoming exposed. This distinction separates the ambitious from the dominant. Most people confuse being seen with being powerful. They flood conversations, speak in every meeting, volunteer for everything, believing presence equals influence. But overexposure breeds familiarity, and familiarity breeds disregard. When people see too much of you, they stop assigning mystery to you, and without mystery, authority dissolves. Think about how hierarchy forms naturally in any group. The loudest voice attracts attention, but the controlled voice attracts gravity. Humans are drawn to those who appear selective with words, with energy, with allegiance. Selectivity signals value. Scarcity creates demand. When you are everywhere, you become background noise. When you appear only at critical moments, your presence gains weight. Your colleagues are constantly measuring social risk. They ask themselves silent questions. Who is safe to challenge? Who might influence decisions later? Who could make my path harder if ignored? These calculations happen instinctively beneath the surface of polite conversation. If you reveal too much emotion or chase approval, you answer those questions for them, and the answer is rarely in your favor. Machiavelli would advise you to let others underestimate how much you observe. Observation is quiet domination. The person who listens more than they speak gathers patterns. Who interrupts whom? Whose jokes receive laughter? Who defers when tension enters the room? Hierarchy announces itself through micro-behaviors long before titles confirm it. Once you see these patterns, you stop moving blindly. You begin moving deliberately. And here is the uncomfortable truth. People trust confidence more than truth. This is why perception is everything. Not deception, perception. The calm certainty in your tone, the refusal to rush explanations, the ability to leave statements unfinished, allowing others to fill the gaps with their own assumptions. Humans trust what they feel they discovered themselves. If you force an idea on them, they resist. If you guide them toward arriving at it, they defend it as their own. At this point, you must make a decision about the kind of listener you are becoming. Passive listeners consume information. Strategic listeners act on it. If you recognize yourself among the few who understand what is unfolding here, then do something simple and decisive. Like this video and subscribe, not as a favor, but as a signal, a small public alignment with a mindset built on clarity and control. Now understand why this matters psychologically. Public signals reshape identity. Once you act, even in small ways, your brain seeks consistency with that action. You begin to see yourself differently, stronger, more aware, less naive. This is how behavioral conditioning works, not through force, but through incremental self-definition. Return to the workplace. The greatest mistake people make is thinking politics begins when conflict appears. Politics begins long before conflict, in relationships, in impressions, in what people expect from you. Expectations are chains. If you allow others to define you as endlessly available, endlessly agreeable, they experience discomfort when you finally set a boundary. They interpret strength as betrayal because they were conditioned to see you as compliant, so you must condition them first. Small pauses before replying, calm refusals without explanation, strategic agreement followed by subtle redirection. These are signals that recalibrate how others approach you. Over time, they stop assuming compliance. They start seeking cooperation instead. Predators do not attack strength, they test weakness. Every workplace has subtle tests, a request framed as urgency, a joke that pushes limits, credit slightly misassigned in a meeting.
Most people react emotionally, defending themselves immediately. The strategist notices the test for what it is. The response is measured, not reactive. You respond in a way that makes the tester reconsider trying again. And here is the deeper inversion. The moment you stop needing validation, your influence increases. Detachment reads as authority because it suggests options. People respect those who appear capable of walking away, not because walking away is the goal, but because independence disrupts manipulation. Power grows quietly. It accumulates in perception, in restraint, in the ability to remain composed while others reveal their anxiety through noise. Now we will go deeper into the one psychological shift that turns you from participant to architect inside any hierarchy. The third rule Machiavelli would follow is the most dangerous, because once you understand it, you can never return to innocence. Control is not gained by forcing people to obey you. Real control comes from shaping the environment in which they make decisions. When people believe they are choosing freely while moving exactly where you intended, dominance becomes invisible and therefore unchallenged. Before we go further, ask yourself one question and answer it honestly. In your workplace, who actually influences outcomes? The person with the loudest opinions or the one who quietly guides the direction of conversations? Comment below. Your answer reveals how clearly you already see the structure around you. Now listen carefully. Humans are not purely rational. They are pattern-seeking creatures wired to follow social cues. We look sideways before looking forward. We check how others react before deciding how we feel. This is ancient survival behavior. In a tribe, disagreement could mean danger, so the brain learned to synchronize. In modern offices, the same mechanism decides whose ideas gain momentum and whose disappear. Machiavelli would not waste energy arguing against the current. He would shape the current itself. Instead of confronting resistance directly, he would plant ideas early in private conversations, long before decisions are formalized. By the time the meeting happens, the outcome feels natural because everyone has already absorbed the suggestion from multiple directions. The idea appears organic, but it was engineered. This is where most people fail. They think power means winning debates. Debates create winners and losers. Losers remember. Resentment accumulates. The strategist avoids visible victories when possible. He lets others believe they discovered the conclusion. Ego becomes an ally rather than an obstacle. Notice how fear operates here. People fear being wrong in public. They fear isolation more than error. If you create an atmosphere where your alignment feels safe and inevitable, they will move toward you voluntarily. This is not manipulation through force. It is manipulation through psychological gravity. You must also understand the role of silence. Silence is not absence. Silence is tension. When someone speaks and you pause before answering, their mind begins searching for approval or disapproval. That moment gives you control over emotional pace. The person who sets the pace controls the conversation. Most people speak to relieve discomfort. You will learn to use discomfort as a lever. Predator and prey dynamics emerge again here. Prey reacts to movement. Predators anticipate it. In workplaces, reactive people chase tasks, chase recognition, chase reassurance. Anticipatory people position themselves where decisions are made before tasks even exist. They understand who influences budgets, who shapes narratives, who quietly advises leadership behind closed doors. Influence is rarely visible at the center. It exists on the edges where information flows first. Another illusion must collapse inside you, the belief that transparency is always strength. Transparency without strategy is exposure. You do not reveal your full intentions to everyone because people interpret information through self-interest. Even allies protect their own position first. Controlled ambiguity allows flexibility. It prevents others from locking you into expectations you did not choose. At this stage, you may begin to feel a shift. The workplace starts to look less like chaos and more like choreography. You see patterns in who speaks after whom, who laughs too loudly at certain comments, who seeks permission before acting. Once you see these rhythms, you can influence them subtly. A question asked at the right moment, a calm agreement that redirects the room, a pause that makes others reconsider their certainty. But there is a warning hidden inside this rule. If you push too hard, people sense control and rebel. Dominance must feel natural, almost accidental. The strongest influence is the one nobody notices until it is already permanent. And this is where the real tension begins. Because once you learn to shape perception, the question is no longer whether you can win, but how far you are willing to go when winning becomes easy.
The fourth rule Machiavelli would follow is the rule that separates temporary influence from lasting authority. Control your emotional visibility, not your emotions themselves. Everyone believes power comes from suppressing feeling. That is a misunderstanding. Suppression creates cracks. Eventually, emotion leaks out in the wrong moment. The true strategist does something subtler. He decides which emotions are allowed to be seen and when they serve a purpose. In every workplace, emotion is currency. Anxiety spreads faster than facts. Enthusiasm becomes contagious. Anger reshapes hierarchy in seconds. People read faces, tone, timing, often more than they read words. When you understand this, you stop reacting automatically. You begin choosing signals deliberately. Watch what happens when someone loses composure publicly. Even if they are right, something shifts. Others start handling them more carefully, or worse, they start dismissing them internally. Humans equate emotional volatility with unpredictability, and unpredictability without control creates fear, not respectful fear, but distancing fear. People avoid trusting unstable forces. Machiavelli would advise you to become emotionally disciplined in appearance, calm when challenged, curious when criticized, slightly amused when tension rises. These responses confuse opponents because they break expected patterns. Most people prepare for resistance or defensiveness. They are disarmed by calmness. Calmness signals options. Options signal power. Understand the biological layer beneath this. The nervous system is contagious. When someone enters a room with tension, others mirror it unconsciously. When someone remains steady under pressure, the group begins to regulate around that person. They become the emotional anchor. This is why the composed individual often becomes the informal leader even without authority. Stability feels safe. Safety attracts alignment. But here comes the inversion. You must not become too predictable. Constant calm can be interpreted as weakness or detachment if it never shifts. Occasionally, controlled intensity reminds others that beneath the calm exists force. A firm pause, a direct statement delivered slowly, a quiet refusal that leaves no room for negotiation. These moments reset perception. They remind the room that your restraint is a choice, not a limitation. Many people make a fatal mistake here. They try to be liked while maintaining power. These goals conflict more often than you think. Being liked requires consistency and comfort. Authority requires uncertainty and respect. You do not need hostility. You need distance, a psychological boundary that prevents familiarity from dissolving hierarchy. Predator and prey dynamics operate again. Prey reveals emotion to seek reassurance. Predators reveal emotion to signal intent. When you show frustration, it should mean something. When you show approval, it should feel earned. If every interaction carries equal emotional weight, your signals lose meaning. Scarcity increases value, even emotionally. There is also a darker truth you must accept. Some people will interpret your composure as arrogance. Let them.
Their interpretation is not your problem. Attempts to constantly soften your image only invite testing. Respect is rarely granted to those who keep explaining themselves. Explanation is often an unconscious request for permission. By now, you should feel the shift in perspective. You are not just surviving workplace politics anymore. You are reading the emotional currents beneath them. You notice who uses humor to mask insecurity, who over-communicates to avoid blame, who performs confidence without internal stability. Once you see these patterns, you stop taking behavior personally. You start seeing motives instead. And that changes everything. Because when people realize they cannot provoke you, cannot rush you, cannot easily read your intentions, their behavior adjusts. They become more careful, more respectful, sometimes even dependent on your steadiness. But the final rule will take this further. It moves beyond strategy into identity itself. It is the shift from playing the game well to becoming the person others orbit without fully understanding why.
The fifth rule Machiavelli would follow is not a tactic, it is a transformation. The moment you stop seeing yourself as a participant in workplace politics and begin seeing yourself as the frame inside which politics happens, the entire hierarchy bends. This is the final inversion. You no longer chase influence, you become the reference point by which others measure their own behavior. Most people live reactively. They wait for tasks, for recognition, for approval signals before deciding how to move. This keeps them permanently below the line of control. The strategist lives one level higher, shaping expectations before others realize expectations are being shaped. You do not need to dominate conversations when your presence already alters how people speak. You do not need to demand respect when your standards quietly enforce it. Notice what happens when someone enters a room and everyone subtly adjusts. Voices soften, decisions pause, attention shifts without being commanded. That is not authority granted by title. That is psychological gravity built over time through consistency, restraint, and selective force. Machiavelli understood that reputation is a weapon forged slowly but capable of winning battles without action. To reach this stage, you must abandon the final illusion, the belief that power is something you take. In reality, power is something others offer when they believe resistance is inefficient. People align with what feels inevitable. Your job is to become inevitable, reliable under pressure, unmoved by noise, strategic in silence, decisive when action matters. This is where many fail. They gain influence and begin displaying it. They become louder, more controlling, more obvious. But obvious power invites challenge. Hidden power reshapes the environment quietly. The strongest players allow others small victories while securing the structure underneath. They do not need credit for every success because outcomes already serve them. You will also notice something uncomfortable as you rise. Distance increases, not because people dislike you, but because clarity creates separation. Those who thrive on gossip or emotional chaos feel exposed around someone who sees patterns too clearly. Some will pull away. Let them. Alignment matters more than proximity. Predator and prey dynamics reach their final evolution here. At the beginning, you learned not to be prey. Later, you learned to think like a predator. Now, you become something else entirely, the terrain itself. Predators and prey both adapt to the environment. If you shape the environment, you influence everyone without direct confrontation. And yet, there is danger. The misuse of these principles leads to isolation or paranoia. Power without internal discipline turns into suspicion. True dominance is calm, not desperate. You do not control every detail, you control your center. From that center, decisions become clearer. Fear loses its grip because you understand the mechanisms behind it. Look back at what has changed in you. You no longer believe workplaces are purely rational systems. You see hierarchy as natural. You understand perception as reality's first gate. You know silence can guide more than speech.
You recognize emotional composure as strategic leverage. And now you understand that the highest level is identity, becoming the person whose presence shapes behavior before a single word is spoken. This is the inner circle Machiavelli would respect. Not the loud, not the reckless, but the precise, the ones who observe longer than they react, the ones who understand that control begins with self-definition and ends with quiet inevitability. If you have reached this point, then you are already thinking differently from the majority. Those who seek clarity over comfort, strategy over impulse, dominance over confusion, make a simple decision now. Subscribe and step fully into the circle that chooses power with open eyes.